Mark, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
And thanks for having me. Excited.
I'm so excited for this now. I actually wanted to start this off because your journey has been so fascinating and interesting over the years. I want to start with the self-esteem component because you scream that you have good amount of self-esteem and you went from a place of low self-esteem to now.
To the lowest.
Yeah, exactly. To the
Doesn't
lowest.
get any lower.
Yeah. And that's, that whole concept is, I think, such a prominent thing at the moment. So much people are living in a loop of low self-esteem and it's stopping them, like your book, stopping them breaking through anything and going forward.
It is.
So like, how did you transition? I know it's over decades, but like, what were the things that helped you move into that level you're in now?
And we're still transitioning. We're always growing. You never stop. You know, I'm always nervous to hear someone never say, I've arrived. You know, never say those words.
No, you've never, like someone said to me the other day, you will be continuously healing the rest of your life till the day you die. I was like, okay.
Yeah, that's morbid, but that's okay.
True, but morbid. I was
That's
like, right.
kind of down. That wouldn't motivate me in the morning.
Like just when you think you've got a handle on your life, no.
You know, the best thing is that always growing, always looking forward, but don't ever stop growing. Yeah, I mean, look, not to give you my life story, but going right back when it comes to self-esteem, I was in school and I was badly bullied for a number of years. And to the extent of, I stayed at home. Now I was about 10, 11 at this point, right? But I stayed at home, played with my toys in my room, wouldn't go out, wouldn't do anything because it's just the fear, you know, and if they see me. And it was really bad because they'd punch me, they'd flick cigarettes at me. And I remember one day I got new shoes for school and the teacher said, and I used to hate compliments because I know they'd hear it and it's going to just like put an X on my back, you know, a target. And she said, oh, you've lovely new shoes. And I said, oh yeah. And I was really happy with these shoes, you know. And after school, they grabbed me and they said, if you don't stand in that dog's dirt, we're going to beat you up. And they made me stand in dog's dirt in the new shoes. And they said, now stand up and down, step up and down. And I remember going home, smelling of dog's dirt. And my granny was there. My mum wasn't home. And she said to me, she said, what happened to you? And I just remember feeling so bad. Like I'd done it because I did stand in it, but they'd made me do it. But yeah. Anyway. And my mum still to this day doesn't know that story. So if she hears this, she'll know now. But anyway, cleaned up the shoes. And that was just one of the lowest moments as a child because I said, I don't want anything new. I don't want to be noticed. I'm going to stay in my room. I never want anyone to even call me my name. I got that bad about it. And I was like that for years. But I tell you where the shift kind of came, the good news part of the story.
I'm nearly in tears now.
I saw, no, it was horrendous for years and years and years. And my mum says, are you okay? You're all right. And she used to mean it. And I knew she genuinely could see. But I said, if I tell her, she'll go to the school, kick open the door, and I'll end up getting on the receiving end of that.
Yeah.
So I said nothing.
Yeah.
And secondary school was a new school, a new day and all this. And she knew there was hassle in school, but she never knew who or what. So secondary school, I go in on my new bike, into the bike shed, all excited, new school, new start. And the bully is standing there beside his bike, goes, oh, Fennell, didn't know you were coming to this school as well. Oh, I'm going to have so much crack with you. Obviously not meaning in a good way. Yeah. And I remember my heart sank day one.
Yeah.
And this is what the shift that happened. I was probably 12, 13 at this point. And he'd been bullying me for like 3 or 4 years at this point. And I remember going in to school, to class, and something in me, don't ask me what it was, said, I am not going to be the person that, like, the way it was. That's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
And at lunchtime, he comes up to me and he has all, you know, he's out with his mates and all this kind of stuff. And he's a big lad, in fairness. But I remember he confronted me and I said, you are not going to put a hand on me. I said, and if you do, it'll be the last time you ever do. And I must have had some look on my face. Yeah. I don't know what it was.
Unhinged.
I probably did look very unhinged.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was like Mel Gibson when he goes, you know, in Lethal Weapon, when he says, he has that cycle. And he goes, what got into you? And I said, I said these. Now, in my head, I'm like, and this might be relevant. I'll share why it might be relevant. In my head, I'm like, what are you doing, Mark? You are dead. He's going to kill you. But something not in my head, it was more in my heart now is the way I describe it, said, I'm not tolerating it no matter what the cost. I'm not putting up with it anymore. And I said, I said these words, I dare you to hit me like this. And I had this unhinged look and he never touched me again.
Wow.
And people used to say, don't mess with Mark. Don't mess with Mark. And I was like something out of the pawn shop. I was blonde with curly hair, and I was really small and skinny. And I was the perfect target. But I remembered that, fast forward into things when I went through even in adult life, saying, Mark, you can tolerate this or not. What's your choice?
Yeah. I think there's huge power to that when you think about your mindset and your energy, how much that impacts the reaction everyone has around you.
100%. And I didn't realize.
I don't think people don't acknowledge that.
I didn't at that time know this. I didn't have a clue. I just said, I can't put up with that anymore.
Even your energy, like the boundaries you have, like there's an energetic boundary around you. I'm a firm believer that the way you, not even just your posture or behavior, it's that energy you emit, the self-belief around that and the self-esteem you have, that's totally palpable from everyone around you.
Yeah, and I think as well, it is off-putting to some because if someone is lacking self-esteem and they see someone with self-esteem, they'll either be drawn to it or they'll be rejected by it.
Yes.
But that's all them, you know, and I remember then, you know, growing up, I didn't ever realize that would be so pivotal.
Yeah.
But what it taught me then really stuck to me later on in life.
It's really interesting as well how our brain at that age, like 10 or 11, is you're wiring for the future. So like there's a lot of neuroplasticity that happened over the years of you rewiring, and that easily could have made you think primitively and subconsciously, okay, I want to be not seen. I want to be quiet. I want to blend into the background. I want to keep a low profile.
Be vanilla.
Be vanilla for the rest of my life because that's what was happening in the subconscious mind. Could have been.
And fast forward then, I started working with, you know, young adults and teenagers and so forth. And I could see, I know what they're going through. I've been there.
Yes.
And I started working with them on self-esteem. But then working with them made me learn more. And then I learned more about myself.
Yeah.
But then fast forward, when I was burnt out and I had that, we were talking about it before we got on the podcast about that horrendous anxiety I went through.
Yes.
I came back to that same life lesson. Well, do you want to stay with this or do you want to do something about this, Mark? It's your choice. There's no easy. Either way is going to be hard. One's long-term, one's short-term. Which way is it going to be? And I remember that same little life lesson. If I change nothing, nothing changes. But the change is my choice. Am I prepared to make it?
Yeah.
So it's kind of stood to me. And I've always kind of reiterated that with people. But we're always growing, always learning.
Yeah, that's fascinating when you take anxiety as a concept and what we were saying. It's just worrying about the future consistently. Like that's what we're doing. But then your past plays a massive role in that because your past helps you predict your future. It doesn't mean that's the truth, but it's helping you predict it because that's what your brain is saying, oh, this happened, so it's going to happen again.
Exactly. So if you have this past failures of things, you've tried and you failed, tried and you failed. Like I run a weight loss program and I always tell this to people, listen, you may have tried and failed many times, but don't take on the mentality that you're a failure just because you failed. You know, you get back up. You know, failure is not falling down, it's refusing to get back up and try again. And I think sometimes we we see our future as in we fear it's going to be a repeat of our past.
Yes.
And you stay stuck.
Absolutely. And it's not a predictor. That's the interesting thing. And now we understand the brain and neuroplasticity. We know it's not a predictor. We know we can rewire. Yeah. We understand that. But it's very easy to get. And I only had one bout of like quite bad anxiety in 2020 and it was very alien to me. And I fully understood that I kept visualizing the future negatively.
Yeah.
And when you do enough visualizations and negative affirmations, that everything rolls out that way.
Yeah,
like,
reinforces.
That's the mood and reinforcing. So there is that understanding of like that work of positive affirmations, the work of visualizing yourself succeeding. All that is very concrete. It's not like, oh, just law of attraction is like this thing that has no neuroscience behind it. We very much act in line with what we think.
Well, basically, as you think is how you're going to be. There's an old proverb that says, as a man thinketh, so is he. You know, your thoughts ultimately define your emotions influence your decisions become actions become habits.
Yeah.
And habits become your character.
Yes.
And your future identity. You know, and I remember writing that in the book and I remember just going, this is how it is, you know, putting it out. But we are never taught that and never understood that. But when you see something in your life that you're not happy with, you say, you know, I wish I could change that. Maybe it's a job or career or weight or even self-esteem. Well, if you base your future on your past, you'll always get your past as your future. But you have to make a choice and say, that's how it's been, but it's not. That's who I was, but it's not who I am now.
Yes.
And with anxiety, I used, because it was 2 years of chronic, horrendous darkness, one of the most difficult things I ever went through. But I remember saying, you know what? I'm not an anxious person. Anxiety is a part of my life, but it's not who I am. And where I'm going, anxiety is not coming.
Yeah.
And so anxiety is a natural part of life. You don't get anxiety free, but the chronic anxiety and getting control and so forth, I did. And the evolution I went through was unbelievable. How difficult was it? It couldn't have been any harder if I'm being honest with you. It got so hard. I didn't want to eat. And fear grows.
It does. You're
afraid of one thing, then you're afraid of 10 things, you know, and I had health anxiety really bad. And it was when I'm swallowing, what if I choked? And then I start overthinking eating, like stupid stuff. You know, I call it stupid, but for me, it was real at the time.
Absolutely.
And I had to work through so many things. But my point is, never base your future on your past. If you do, you'll only get your past in your future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a mirror. And going back to that time when you felt very stuck and you were in the thick of the anxiety, how do you take even the first step out of that? Because it's very easy to take the steps now when you're feeling in like a good mindset. And I'm always kind of aware of that when we're talking on a podcast, that there's a lot of people listening that actually are in the darkest of lowest point.
Yeah.
Even the first step out of that dark bubble, that's the key. And then it's like a domino effect. You
100%.
can run.
Yeah.
What's that like initial thing?
Yeah. And make whatever the initial thing is, first and foremost, make it a small thing.
Yeah.
It's got to be bite size. It can't be big steps. You're not going to change overnight. And motivation won't be sustained. So you might feel pumped up, ready to change your life today. It may not feel like that tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
So don't rely on motivation either. You've got to rely on a systematic approach of this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is I used to get up in the morning. Okay. And this is when anxiety was the worst. I'd wake up a couple of seconds into waking up, anxiety was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to wake up in the morning and say, right, what am I going to do today? No matter what.
Yeah.
Well, first off, I'm going to get out of bed. Then I'm going to get dressed. Then I have this job to do, that job to do. And I have that thing to go to later on. Anxiety would say, oh, no, you're not, kind of thing. Well, what if I go there? And what if I collapse again? And what if it's my heart again? And what if that happens at the event? And what if I get anxiety attack at the event and everyone's looking at me? And all these fears would go. And I made a decision. I'm going no matter what.
Yeah.
And if anxiety shows up, well, up to you. You're not invited. But I used to say it like that. I never saw anxiety as a part of me.
Yeah.
It was there, but it wasn't who I am.
Yeah.
And
that's very important though, in terms of like self-identification and
100%.
Not labeling yourself as.
If you label yourself, I'm an anxious person, how are you going to feel every day?
Exactly.
Anxious.
I had a client and she's one of my first clients and she said, I'm just so anxious naturally. So is my mother. It's like in the genes. And
it's a belief though.
It's a belief. And we worked on that belief in terms of like and actually in a few months ago, she was like, wow, I don't identify with that anymore.
That's the way. You see, there is epigenetics and there is things that can be passed on, but they're so minute. They're not.
Yeah.
Like, it's like the person says, oh, well, I'm just big boned. You know what I mean? I can't. No, genetics play a part, yes, and conditioning it can be a part. But when it's only 1% of who you are, it's not really relevant.
Uh-huh.
So we must look at that and say, what's the language? What's the narrative you're saying to yourself?
Yes.
Because you're going to get the following ensuing outcome. If I tell myself I'm anxious, emotions will follow. I'm not going to feel non-anxious when I say I'm an anxious person.
Yes.
Change the narrative. So I used to make a decision what I'm going to do. And I used to say, no matter what, I'm going to that event.
Yeah.
And if I have the worst and most, and then I started, this is my biggest breakthrough. You're ready for this. Let's go. Something else. It's actually so simple. I started saying, so what?
I love this.
To
Go
the
on
what
with
ifs.
this. Yeah, let's run with this.
But what if I get anxiety? So what? What if I collapse? So what?
Mm-hmm.
But what if they all think what's wrong with him? So what?
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety is visceral, so you cannot deny it. But I say, well, so what if it happens? So what? I'm going anyway.
Yeah.
I'm going anyway. Because it's what's worse, to not go and to be in regret all day tomorrow thinking I didn't because anxiety got one up on me.
Mm-hmm.
So you say, right, anxiety, you can come along if you want, but you're in the backseat.
Yeah. And also entertaining the worst case scenario and then saying, oh, well.
Well, do you know what I used to do after a period of time? I used to start going, right, what's the worst could happen? And I used to manually create it because now I felt a sense of control over it.
Yeah.
Rather than anxiety just letting it happen in my imagination, I used to create what's the worst. And then I used to go, and at the end, no matter what I create, I'm going to say, so what? But what if this happens? And I'd make a big picture. I'm not advising everyone to do this, but this is what worked for me.
Yeah.
Create this big picture. And then I'd say, and you know what? So what?
Yeah.
I'm going to the party. I'm going to the event.
Yeah.
I'm going to get up on stage or whatever. And I started owning, I suppose there was such liberation in that.
Mm.
And that was really one of the parts. There's other parts, the book is full of them, but there's one of the parts of getting my breakthrough was literally saying, so what to the what ifs.
Yeah.
Simple, but very effective.
It's interesting as well when you look at like that was a huge tool of yours.
Mm.
And there's multiple, as you said, it's like very systematic, multifaceted. There's so many things that got you from that like dark bubble to now.
Mm.
And it's very interesting how everyone has a different unlock.
There is. Yeah. Different light bulb.
Yes. And it's just acknowledging that. And I think we're so desperate for answers when you're stuck in, poor mental health and a lot of anxiety. It's very easy to be like, I'm just going to do this cookie cutter way of my walk, drink my water and like positive affirmations. None of that might work.
No, like people said, meditate. And I was like,
worst thing you can do.
It didn't work for me when your mind's, I don't want to be left alone with my thoughts.
Oh, and that's funny. Understanding regulation tools suit different scenarios. So when you're
100%.
In freeze, meditation isn't the best tool for you at that point.
Not ideal, no. And there was so many things people said, do, and some were suited later on, but I probably read every book, and I'm going to say probably every study that was done on anxiety. Like I literally I was the guy reading, Google academics, the reports and the theses and stuff. I ran into overdrive because that was just the way it was. And I learned so much, but I also learned so much of what doesn't work. Yeah. Like there's a lot of fluff, like there cookie cutter, like just do ABC and you'll be free. It doesn't work like that.
Talk to me about that kind of fluffy side of things, because that is still around.
It's more around than ever.
Yeah.
Right? Like here's the thing. So, and I am for affirmations.
Yeah.
Right. However, people just say, oh, just say it and that's how it's going to be and so forth. No. Words have got to line up with emotion. And you've also got to line up with a visual. Now you have a real affirmation. Mm-hmm. You know, I can do this. And that's based off reminding yourself of when you got through stuff before. And reminding yourself that you are able, based off your history, using your past as in a positive sense. Now when you say there's meaning in it, and now there's also a conviction in it because you want this to be a reality as well. So that's now an affirmation that works. But just simply saying words doesn't work. They've done studies on this. There's a book called, I think it's called Let's Talk. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's Let's Talk. But it's a study on people just using words. And they said minimal change. If
you think about it logically as well, unless you resonate with the actual language and your current situation, it's not going to sound real. So the body and subconscious mind isn't really going to take it in anyway.
So you've got to be changing your beliefs, right? You know, that are not serving you for better beliefs. But they have to be relevant. Yeah. They have to be relevant and specific to you.
Absolutely.
Meditation might work. It didn't work for me. You know, affirmations might work, but they don't work for everybody. So it's about finding, as I say, take the meat, leave the bones and find what works for you.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of clickbait online. And so it's very shallow stuff on the surface stuff. And there's truth to it, but if you got to get the depth. People talk about high performance, or flow state, and these kind of big words, which are, that's the world I work in. But what I realize is that people have these notions of what that is. High performance means being busy. No, it doesn't.
No.
Flow state means I'm getting loads done. Not necessarily. You could be getting loads done, but it's not relevant to where you're going.
Yeah, you might be in a flow state sitting on a boat doing nothing.
You're going somewhere, but it doesn't mean. So the point is, I think dig a little bit deeper. And I think, going online and so forth, you can get knowledge. I share a lot on my Instagram. That's what I do all the time, reels and so forth, like yourself, right? But sometimes if you're struggling, you got to go a little bit deeper, get the knowledge. Knowledge is power, and find what works for you. And don't just because it worked for them mean it's going to work for you either.
And that actually can be classified as fluff when you're thinking all them things somebody said worked for them, they could be fluff to you.
Yeah.
Like,
I'll give you an example.
Go on.
So there's a guy I work with. He'd be a speaker. And I was speaking at the same event to him. And he's a friend of mine. And he's saying about meditation every day, and he's real into meditation. He's kind of like spiritual kind of guy and whatever else. And I said, come here to me. How often do you meditate? I know the guy, so I can be honest with him, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, no, well, I'm very busy at the moment. I said, no, hang on. How often do you meditate? Because I work, And I'm being straight up now. I said, because you've been out there sharing a whole lot of BS as far as I'm concerned because you don't meditate. And he goes, a Sunday I would, if the kids are, and I had to, no, I don't meditate as much as I like. But yet you're out there telling. So I said, how do you unwind then? What do you do? I said, that's what you should be talking about when you're in there.
Yeah.
This guy's a psychologist. And I was like, he goes, I do. I know that's what'll work for people. And I said, but it's not working for you.
Yeah.
So why are you telling? So now I was reprimanding him because in a nice way, as a friend kind of, we're still friends, I think. No, we are.
When he hears this, no.
but it's just face to face with him. But he goes, you're dead right. You're dead right.
Yeah.
And he got up, we were doing a Q&A on a panel. And we were out sitting in chairs and people were interviewing. And he said, I need to say something. He says, I know meditation works. But he said, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't do it as much as I should. And he says, but one thing I do. And I said, what do you do to unwind? He goes, I'll be honest with you. He says, I love playing my PlayStation 5. And I said, so I got the mic. I said, now we're getting to the truth of it. He's older than me. And the place erupted.
I love a PS5.
I know. I love a PS5. I said, now you're being honest. See, I knew he was a gamer. So, and I like playing games as well. But I says, now we're getting to the crux, and the place erupted. I said, now it's real talk. And then we really got into it. And there's a nutritionist girl, health and so forth. I says, do you like a takeaway? I said, come on, let's get into this. And she goes, oh, I do love a takeaway. So this health and wellness just went into this open talk.
You just put a torch on the whole event.
What? Let's keep it real.
100%
Let's keep
agree.
it real.
Oh, that's the thing. So
people came away from that day going, that was the best. He's kept it real.
Unreal,
and he's had the balance, that this is what works. We don't always get time to do it.
And you know what you did as well? You lifted guilt off people's shoulders, which is like
Just
the
be
least effective emotion. When you're laden in guilt, they were probably looking at this guy who thought, he's a psychologist, he meditates all the time. I should be meditating. And then once you take the guilt away and you realize actually the tools could take 1 minute. I could I can't actually give an example, but like Sudoku, maybe you love Sudoku. Maybe that's your thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to think of things that aren't.
But things that, I suppose, make you a bit more mindful, take you away from the stress, and you're a bit more regulated afterwards.
100%.
There's lots of things. Meditation works, don't get me wrong, but I don't meditate every day.
No, maybe, right? You're replacing
I do
for meditation.
thinkitation.
Oh, thinkitation.
You heard that?
I want to hear about thinkitation, but you know what your thing could be? You know Maniac, the song Maniac?
Yeah, 2000. Maniac 2000.
Roaring that at the top of your voice could be your regulation tool.
But dancing is proven psychologically to be a great thing for regulating emotions and hormones. They say there's a hormonal shift in the body.
Oh, totally.
So find your thing and do it. And just because everyone else is branding on about what's topical doesn't mean it genuinely works.
Exactly.
Sorry to be a bit controversial.
No, I'm loving it. And I also want to hear about this thinkitation, please.
Thinkitation, right. Heard about this stateside. And a guy gets on and he goes, I don't, and I'm not against meditation. I don't come across like that. But he says, I don't do meditation. I do thinkitation. And everyone's kind of leaned in. What's thinkitation?
We love an overthinker.
So basically it's like visualization, right? It's like an overthinker. But he says, no, he says, I will, and here's what he does. And I do this. I actually genuinely do this, but didn't realize it was called a thing. I will, when stressed or, up to the nines or everything's going kind of busy, like coming back after holidays, and it's all go. What I do is I'll get everything out of my head onto a to-do list. I get the to-do list beside my calendar and everything goes from the to-do list into the calendar. Mm-hmm. And if I can't find space, it's deleted.
Yeah.
So now I know everything that I need that's stressing me is dealt with. So the reason he was sharing this and I thought was so true is because he's, how can I meditate with all that stuff I know I need to do? I need to get that done. Then I can do anything. And he said, then I will focus on, right, what do I need to create? What's the thing, the labor of love that I want to invest in when it comes to his business or otherwise? And he goes, I call that thinkitation. I said, that's really cool. So he basically spends 15, 20 minutes creating or, should we say.
And that's one of the best states a human can be in is creativity. So you can certainly see the merit of doing that and actually sitting. Like last night I sat down and there was a few things banging around in my head before I meditated. And I do like a meditation.
I'm not against it at all. I do it, but I just don't do it every day.
It's highly effective. But again, there's a skill level of meditation. My skill level of meditation is quite low. I'm only doing it a few years, 5, 10, 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
It's very low. I can't get into that state. A person that's doing it for years is in, and they can tap into it anytime, even
like
in
the
chaos.
gurus can do it for hours or
exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
So there's different levels of meditation. That's just something to so bear in mind. Like at the beginning, meditation doesn't feel overly beneficial because you're not skilled at it. But then it's highly beneficial a few years later. But I digress. Last night, I was like, my head's full, right?
Yeah.
Meditation isn't going to clear it because, again, I'm not good enough at it yet.
Yeah.
So I sat down, brain dumped. There were 3 circles on the page. One brained up was my worries. Other ones was my gratitude. Other ones was work stuff.
Like that, yeah.
So I'm after banging out everything that's knocking around in my head onto a page. Wow, was my brain still after that? Because I was like, I know exactly what I need to do. I tried to do it in semi-neat writing so I could go back to another day, tomorrow, like today really, and look.
And it's legible.
Like, it's legible. The notes I have here are not legible. So that's it. Like, what are your tools? I regularly do a brain dump like that.
Yeah, it's good. And it's good. I like the whole, get out of your head and put it into the calendar.
Yeah.
The to-do lists obviously they rarely get done. Was it 84% of them?
Yeah.
84% what's on your to-do list doesn't get done. But once it's in the calendar, I know it's sorted. It's going to happen.
If it's in Google Calendar, it's happening.
Yeah, basically. And it's done. Set intention and that's it. But then you've got that space then to create and whatever else. Because I find to get into that creative flow kind of state, I have to have the stressors dealt with first, and I generally will do them the day before and then the creativity is tomorrow.
So what's your idea of flow state? Like, what are you doing when you are in flow state? What is flow state? What does it mean to you?
Flow state's my happy place. Probably like any human when you're flowing.
Yeah.
Flowing is where you are mentally and emotionally absorbed into a task that is rewarding and fulfilling to you. Mm-hmm. That's ultimately what flow state is. And you're in that process. And there's no barriers to entry. There's no hurdles. It's just flowing. And challenges that come up, you just kind of navigate them gently. And so basically a flow state, if you think of an athlete for a moment, an athlete gets in, they have their muscle memory, they've been trained, they know what the 1-2 duck and so forth. They have what they're going to do on their opponent. Mm-hmm. They get in and it starts to work for them. What they plan in training starts to happen. They get into flow state. They're going to win that match, bottom line. And so getting into flow state in sport is very obvious. But when it comes to ourselves, it's sometimes to get in flow state, we just need to remove or deal with the stressors. That's ultimately what stops most people getting into that imaginary space.
Interesting to think of it like that.
Yeah.
Because people are struggling so much to get into what they deem is flow state. But obviously, are you dealing with the stressors that are making your brain chaotic in the first place?
The ones, you see, when you are stressed, your amygdala hijacks your prefrontal cortex. Your rationale is slightly lowered and your tolerance is also lowered. Hence, you kind of blow off the handle at something small. So when you want to get into flow state, you've got to, I got to get the limbic system, emotional center of the brain, amygdala and so forth, under control.
Yeah.
What's causing its stress? Deal with that now. Put that fire out. Yeah. Because you're not going to get into flow with that in the back of your head. And the amygdala is in the back of your head, literally.
Yeah.
So you've got to deal with that first. Now, what do we need to get done today? Let's start with the bite-sized stuff. Because it's why when someone says, I have to tidy that box room. It's full of stuff. It's a storage room. Okay, let's go. Our objective is to empty it. Break it right down. We're going to start with what corner you're going to start in. What's the first little box you're going to tackle? And when you start to go, then you'll flow. Yeah. Flow is cultivated. And it starts by simple steps done consistently over time with that task that you find rewarding.
Yeah.
And it's like the person who cleans a house. Once they get it cleaned, maintaining it's a lot easier. And now they feel content in their home. But then when it gets messy again, they go back to feeling stressed.
Yeah. It's interesting. Say if you see a teacher at the top of the classroom and they're trying to help you learn how to solve a complex maths equation, right?
Yeah.
But all the kids in the class are screaming and roaring and messing.
Yeah.
Your ability to problem solve or to think is very low. Distractions. So if there's a really good classroom management and everything's quiet, you're solving way more things at speed. That's how I think of like flow state and how if your brain is chaotic, it's very hard to problem solve anything or think clearly.
Yeah.
But most of us are dealing with a chaotic mind because we're overthinking all the time.
100%. This is why people, if you're a late night person or an early morning, but a late night person, which I would be, I get some of my best ideas and creativity at night because I've gotten a lot of the stuff I need to get done that day. There's no distractions.
Yeah.
Everything's quiet. Emails are quiet. Phone is down. I have a new mantra though for 2025.
Hit me.
All right. If it doesn't make me grow, flow, or glow. I'm saying no.
I heard you
and that is my new mantra. It's all over the place. People are sharing it everywhere. But it's so true. And sometimes the noise, and this is the kind of the clanger, sometimes the noise is other people.
Oh, for sure.
And some people kind of have to, you know what, maybe I don't need to jump on that WhatsApp group straight away. Maybe I don't need to get back to that person. Some people will be emotional vampires. And sometimes they're the people we need to kind of say no to. Now, your kids aren't included in that, just for the record. They take all my time, Mark.
Damn it.
Narcissistic children. No, it's not the case. But what I'm saying is, but there are spinning plates that you can let fall to the floor and smash and just start saying, like I said at the start, so what?
So what? I love that. Even if that was your mantra for 2025,
just
so
say,
what?
So what?
Yeah. But that whole thing, I think a lot of us are living in that mind that never can get even near the flow state because we're not ever clearing the noise.
And statistics line up with this. So in Harvard's Business School did a study on this about people who reached their potential or they deemed have reached. They said only 7% of people confirmed that they believed they'd reached their potential, or should I say got to what made them fulfilled in life.
Right.
So 93% of people don't. Why is that? The study went a bit deeper. And give the short answer to the question is because people are preoccupied, busy, and there's a whole lot of noise.
Yeah.
And they're not getting to what actually tops them up or makes them fulfilled. Yeah. Fulfillment isn't something that you necessarily have to do every day. But if you're never tapping into it and you're constantly just putting out fires, you're in a stressed state. And look at the statistics on anxiety through the roof right now. Look
through the roof.
And we've more apps and AI to help us than ever before, but yet we're more anxious than ever before. So because we're getting busier.
You look at that recipe as well for a human that's functioning at a high level, high performance, we'll say. They are very disciplined in terms of weeding out distractions and having boundary living of like when they're going on a walk, they're not on their phone. When they're sitting down to do work, they're eliminating distractions.
100%.
If you look at that person of the most high performing individual and you look at their traits, that tells us a lot. Because what are the rest of us doing? The large percentage is we're entertaining all the multitasking, all the distractions. Yeah. Sometimes it's extremely difficult to eliminate them. But to counteract that, what you need more rest and more fulfilling activities. So if you can't get away from all the really distracting things, at least look what you can bring in. What's additional?
100%.
Like what's fulfilling? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis, Mark, that's like highly fulfilling? And you're like, oh, this is giving me, like filling me up rather than draining me.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, we all think, oh, if there was another day in the week, it'd be great. Oh, if there was only 2 of me, I'd get so much done. We don't need more time.
No.
Right? We just need to give the things we love more time.
Exactly.
And I've said it to people who said, oh, Mark, I want to do your confidence course or your weight loss course. Oh, but how much time will it take? And I said, well, here's the thing. If I said to you, there was €100 on the kitchen table in a house, You'd say, and the house on fire, would you go in and get the €100? You say, €100 is not worth it. Now, if I said there's €1,000,000, you'd think about it a bit more. Now, if I said that your future contentment and happiness is on that table, are you prepared? I'd battle the flames for that.
Yeah.
When we see the reward great enough, we will all of a sudden make the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get busy and distracted, and therefore we just totally leave ourselves, and then we end out next year, New Year's, I'll start in January, I'll start on Monday, or whatever, and it never happens. And so we repeat the cycle. And so you've got to make a decision. If you change nothing, nothing changes.
I love that. And also, if you're not changing it, you are choosing it.
100%.
And that's a scary one, because if you take an assessment of your life, of what you're putting up, like I'll give you an example. My business manager, and she's also my friend, she was like, how do you just like always do exercise? Like you're not missing it. You're so boundaried with it. How does that happen? And it's because I've tied so much weight to that, been my mental health, been a good mother. If I miss that, I can't function properly. But what are most people tying the good behaviors to? The rationale isn't deep enough. So if you do enough work on the rationale behind why you're doing these behaviors, it's a lot easier not to skip them and make them non-negotiable. That's massive. Like the rewiring of, why am I doing the hydration, the steps, the journaling? Like, why am I actually doing it? Really understand like the deeper why.
If you don't take control of your life, someone else or something else will.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Mm-hmm. So you can either set intention, or you can be at the mercy of whatever. Yeah. And it might be your boss. They'll always get you working more. The kids will call on you a whole lot more if you let them. You will be at the mercy of whatever it might be if you allow it. But it was like me with the bully. And I know it goes back to when I was a kid, but that's the lesson. I said, if I don't stand up, I know how the past goes. I know how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I said, I know more.
Yeah.
And I inside was going, even if I get battered for this, which I probably will do, I'd rather go down fighting than accept the way it's currently been before.
Yeah.
It thankfully worked out. I'm not suggesting do that every time. But I learned that in life and say, you know what? Viktor Frankl said it, Man's Search for Meaning, great book.
Mm-hmm, great book.
You cannot control, what comes at you, but you always have the power to control your reaction.
And that's it. It's having more confidence and realization that your reaction is everything.
And that's what self-esteem is.
Yes.
It's trusting that I will know what to do when that happens. Mm-hmm. I will know what to do when tempted. And when we get into a place and we don't know what to do, or it fails, our self-esteem gets ebbed away.
Yeah.
It gets eroded. But when we say, you know what? I need to just believe that I can do this, and there will be mistakes, and there will be errors, and there will be days I'll feel like it and days I won't. But no matter what, I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
It's like brushing your teeth, right? You can go a day without brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
You can go 2. There's going to be consequences to bad breath and so forth.
Yeah.
But you can't go a month. And you definitely can't go a year. So look, give yourself that some days you might forget to brush your teeth, whatever your task is. Maybe it's losing weight. Maybe it's building your self-esteem. You're going to have some days where you don't. But the main thing is that overall you still are.
Yes.
That you're showing up 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it'll only get a whole lot harder and a whole lot worse. Mm-hmm. So give yourself that bit of grace. And you have to, and we're very hard on ourselves as well. Because you go online, you see everyone's like they're winning at life. Trust me, I coach a lot of influencers. They're not all winning. None of them are.
And even like going back to that psychologist with the meditation, that's such a good example. Like now when you're doing this and you're doing podcasts, you talk to people and they're very honest with you about what they are and aren't doing. And obviously, you have the highlight reels on Instagram, and people keep saying that, but nobody actually really believes it. They forget them when they watch someone's best life.
Yeah.
And they actually continuously forget. Yeah. So like culling all them people on social media that you feel kind of comparison with is really important.
I think, if it does, look, if it's not serving you, why are you doing it? Do you know? And I know that sounds very simplistic, but no, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you look at is probably your phone, and you start on the scroll. And if you're following good people that set you up for the day, great, like yourself, or even following my account, happy days, markfennell.ie. But even if you're doing that, right, great. But if you're following people that you're comparing to, you are literally setting your mindset in a negative space. And now you get up, now one of the kids annoys you, and you're already feeling kind of down about yourself, whatever it was, because you've seen this other person online who seems to be living and winning at life. Yeah. Now the child gets on at you, you lose the head and whatever else. You get to the school gates, and there's posts down the top, and the clothes aren't what you wanted to wear, and someone then pulls up looking immaculate, some other mother, and then you're feeling like a failure, and you go home, I'm just going to drink coffee and eat scones. I forget about today, So, but that all starts from the start, So win the morning, seize the day. It's an old parable.
But even with like neuropsychology, that makes so much sense, because the note you start the day on, that continues into the rest of the day.
It's called priming.
There we go.
That's it, basically.
Yeah. And we need to remember that, because majority of people do scroll in the morning, and that is then creating this loop of you wanting quick dopamine the rest of the day as well.
100%. You get into that, and then obviously dynorphin pulls it back down, and dopamine pushes it back up. But here's what I say to people when I'm coaching people. I said, look, you can live your life reactively, or you can live it proactively.
Yeah.
Your choice. And reactive is, I'll just, whatever shouts the loudest, I'll just keep putting out the fires all day long.
Yeah.
Procrastinate on the things I want to do. But proactive says, okay, I've got my responsibilities, screaming kids, this, that, and everything else.
Yeah.
But I must do this today for me, because that's going to push the needle in the direction I want to go. 1% better each week is far better than nothing.
I like as well when, I think it was in Atomic Habits, James Clear's book, and it said, I think it was this book anyway, do 10 things 1% better rather than one thing 10% better.
That's true. Yeah, I agree with that.
Now, maybe it's not 10 things, maybe it's 2 or 3 things, but it just creates the mindset that we're trying to do things incrementally, slowly, and we're in this for the long game.
Bite size.
Absolutely bite size.
But consistency is far greater than occasional brilliance.
Yeah.
You've got to be consistent. And that's when it comes to flow. People say, oh, I'd love to be in flow. I'm far from flow. If you want to be in flow, get consistent and watch. It will get easier and your motivation will start to rise as well. It gets easier and you start to flow in things.
Delayed gratification as well is something to develop.
100%.
Like a lot of us,
instant.
You're the same with fat loss clients. It's like you need to see this as a long-term thing and that it's continuous and there's no end game. Plus, you need to understand that if you hit the rock every day and there's no chips coming out of it, one day it's going to split in half. You will see the results, but you have to expect no results for some time, some weeks. And that does take a level of boundary and discipline.
100%. Alison Levine. She was the first, she wanted to, not Avril Lavigne, that's a singer, Alison Levine, right? She wanted to conquer Everest and she wanted to be the first woman to do it. And she put together, got sponsors. It was a load of news all over America and everything. She's going to do it. She goes 300 meters shy of the summit. They had to cancel because of a storm. She comes back and she said, what am I going to say to all of the sponsors, all the interviews lined up because I was going to do it, that I didn't do it? She comes back. She then comes back and says, I have a choice. Do I feel like a failure or what do I do? Here's what she said in her head. Do you know what? I'm the highest woman. I've climbed the highest any woman ever has. I didn't get to the summit, but I'm still the highest climbing woman that I got 300 meters beyond, just shy of the summit. And she said, I'm going to do it again. And her motto, like you just said, was when it got tough, she learned from her mistakes and she could have gone off into oblivion, never written a book. She's written books. I know her. Yeah. I've had chats with her and everything. She's so cool, very approachable. And long and the short, she's based in the States. She teaches mountaineering now. But here's what happened. She comes back and says, I'm going to do it again. And her motto was, just get to the next rock. She said, that's all I did. Get to the next rock. The next rock. She said, forget about the summit. Just get to the next rock.
Yeah.
And she summited years later and was the first woman to get summit Everest.
Stop.
Amazing story.
It's interesting as well, right? She had 2 paths there. And we look at the other path, which is what a lot of people would take, of just disappear into oblivion, be negative, and just that's it. And that's a level of like self-sabotage, we'll say. And if we go into that realm of self-sabotage and somebody kind of starting to think negatively, how do you bring clients from when they're in a place of stuck? And the more stuck they are, the more they self-sabotage.
Yes.
How do we transcend through that?
Self-sabotage is based in fear. So at the end of the day, it's the fear of what if I repeat, should we say, what if I repeat, I get to an extent or a place and then I fail again. Oh, I don't want to go through that. No, I'll just do nothing. So there's that. That's the self-sabotage at the start. So you never start. You kind of talk yourself out in that way. But then there's a self-sabotage where people start to move and they start to grow. And it's not a flaw. It's just rooted in fear. And the way to overcome self-sabotage is clarity and self-compassion. And clarity simply says, well, what is it I'm actually afraid of? Because just to explain for people who maybe wonder what self-sabotage is, if you are in a new relationship and all of a sudden it's now gone deeper and it's gone longer and further than any relationship you've ever had, or you start a business and now you're making money that you've never seen before, that level of money, or you're in a job and you're promoted, or you're working on your confidence and it's now grown, or you're getting free of anxiety, whatever it might have been, you've grown to a new place that is unfamiliar. Yeah. The brain is kind of going, this is unfamiliar, and the brain loves to, it's a threat detective system. It's trying to protect us. It's unfamiliar, not used to this. Oh, let's just be the old you. You know how that goes. It's predictable. It's easy. Just eat the bag of chips on the Friday night with the bottle of wine. It's fine. We know how that goes. And you're kind of thinking, oh, but that's not who I want to be. And so there's an anxiety that kind of starts oozing up in the person because they're in an unfamiliar territory. They're at a new place in life. And what happens is subconsciously then they start to self-sabotage to put themselves back into the familiar because that's where they were comfortable. Self-sabotage shows up when you're outside your comfort zone. But when you get clarity and realize, well, what am I afraid of here? Is there any truth to this anxiety, or is it just anxiety because it's all new to me?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like going to a new job. There's going to be anxiety. Even though you're well able for the job, there's going to be anxiety because it's new. It's a new position, new anxiety. But then self-compassion is, I'm growing here. There's going to be mistakes. It's not going to be perfect trajectory. I'm not going to get it right every day. It's like the brushing the teeth. I may miss a day or two, but once I'm brushing my teeth for most days in the week, it's grand. And it's having that self-compassion to be gracious with yourself, because what happens is that new level you're at, you grow into it, and it becomes your new norm if you don't allow the self-sabotage to take you back.
I loved that just incredibly clear synopsis of it, because when you think of that in so many different areas, like, why does somebody continuously overeat? They get a handle on it, they lose weight, and then they go back to the old patterns. That's the best example.
Old identity. And
you've never actually thought about your new identity long enough. And that's how you get to that in the new norm. Is that like new level of self-belief and believing in your new identity.
Yeah, and it's so foreign and new. It's like having a new toolbox and you've never used any of the tools before, but like you're getting to handle on them, and so much. It's like driving a car. At first, it's a lot of brain power and you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then years later, you forget even driving to a place because it becomes so automated. That's the way it's going to go. When I work with people on weight loss and mindset, I start there.
Yeah.
And I say, if I could click my fingers and we could describe your life in a year, whatever mental wishes you need, how would you have your life looking?
Yeah. That's my first activity with a fat loss client, because if they never visualize what can be, they can't work towards anything.
No, you have to have a goal.
You can't just be consistent with the behavior without believing that's your new identity.
100%. You've got to, and I mean, my book, that's what it's based on, is identity. I always say, rather than start with being reactive, start with being proactive. And the proactive is towards who I want to be and how I want it to be. Be prepared that the goalposts will move, and it may not be idealistic, and nothing's going to be perfect, but it'll be far better than you are now. Because if there's an unction in you to change something, that means you're inside, really deep down, you're not happy with things.
Yeah.
And so why not work on those things? Because even working on those things can bring a level of happiness, even if you don't change them, just working on them.
Yeah, that's so true. The actual process and the glass ceiling, like the glass ceiling that
you're giving yourself hope.
Yes.
At the end of the day, and that obviously has subsequent emotions.
For sure. I read that book, was it The Big Leap? Is that the one? Anyway,
Big Leap, yeah.
Talking a lot about...
It's the goldfish jumping out of the bowl.
Yeah, exactly, that one. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they get to a point, they've already put a mental barrier to break through that.
Yeah, ceilings, mental ceilings.
So many mental ceilings. If you look at every compartment in your life, in the way you eat, in the way you exercise, in the way you sleep, you've put a mental ceiling on all of them things.
Limits.
A cap.
We call it limiting beliefs, but it's basically, it's like a restrictor on an engine.
Yeah.
That doesn't let you go faster than a certain speed. We've put it there based off our past.
Yes,
and
based
maybe
off the past.
What we've been told in life.
And based off self-worth, what we actually think we deserve subconsciously.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at that, and I did that exercise recently, I took every kind of area of my life in terms of relationships, business, the relationship with my kids, blah, blah, blah. And I looked the ceilings I'd put in every compartment.
Lovely. You went deep.
I went deep, but it was so telling, because I looked and I said, why am I not progressing? There was one element of parenting, my parenting basically. I said, why can I not progress through that? When I become dysregulated, why do I do X behavior? And I completely understood then, just from a few moments of thinking, because that's what my parents did.
You see, we always base it on a template.
Past.
Nurture nature, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Just like when I look at my nutrition habits.
Yeah.
They've come a very, very long way from disordered eating to now, but I still revert back to some behaviors in certain circumstances. Why is that? Because I learned that in my childhood or my teenage years. So that's self-awareness. And people that are totally have no self-awareness, that's something to bear in mind. We always have to be kind of reflecting, thinking, journaling, being in flow state to understand ourselves.
Open-mindedness. You see, that's the difference between fixed and growth mindset.
Yes.
Like, I'll give you a story. This is a good story about sausages, right? So I loved... It's a good story, right? I loved a breakfast roll, right? Yeah. Now I teach weight loss now.
Who doesn't in Ireland love a breakfast roll?
This is mad now. And, a full Irish fry. Now, this is going back years, right? Full Irish fry and all that kind of stuff. And my wife wouldn't have been into it, right? She's a personal trainer, that's what she did. But she wouldn't have been into it. Just didn't, whatever. Then I read a book. The book was called How Not to Die, right? And it talks about different things that are good practice, bad practice around nutrition and so forth. And I read this thing about pork, right? And it said that consuming X amount of pork per year, ham, whatever else, carcinogenic, don't go near hot dogs, whatever you do, like all of this stuff, right? And I read that and I said, how can I eat that knowing that information, right? And I gave up ham and I gave up pork and breakfast and the whole lot gone, right? But so gone because I was open-minded to read the book. Now, here's the story. I've given that book to friends of mine. And they said, listen, sure, my family's all eating. They've turned over. And the first thing is, sure, you can't, if you're Irish, not eat a breakfast roll. And this is the conversation. And I get it. But I said, monkey see, monkey do. It's fixed mindset. I said, but do you not see this? And it's like the smoker with the packet, the lung. I'm not knocking smokers. We all have things we need to work on. But you see the pictures, right?
Yeah.
Now in my head, I'm like, how can you be smoking when you're looking at those pictures, right? So
my dad's smoking 60 a day and he's looking at that like black lung on the packet of fags every day.
Yeah. So we have a thing in our brain called scotoma where we blot out what we don't want to see, And so I would say to anybody, and I'm not saying everyone has to give up hammering. I'm not, I don't get wrong. Having an odd cocktail sausage,
it's okay.
Whatever.
You can give up ham. That's okay, Mark. I'm going to say it's okay.
I need to hear
you don't need to justify this.
After
it's okay. You do you, Mark.
It's part of my heritage. so I gave up the thing, right? And people used to slag me going, something wrong with you. You're getting notions just because I wouldn't eat ham because it said it's carcinogenic. so this is
just because ham's killing me. I just didn't want to eat the ham.
Abuse I got. But I really had to open my mind. But there's a moral in the story. I had to be open-minded enough to take that on and see the sense and make the change.
Yeah.
But I also had no support about doing it.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you're growing, you're going to have people tell you, you're mad. You're notions.
Yeah.
What's you doing? You're meditating. What do you, you're going to have people do that.
Yeah.
So what I always say, sometimes self-awareness can be an isolating thing.
Yeah.
And when you start to progress, not everyone's going to progress with you. So be careful. The self-sabotage might be external saboteurs of people who are closest to you. So beware of that as well. And that's how I got over sausages.
That is important though, because I, for many years, was fully vegan, like 100%, because that was my belief. I watched documentary.
I did the vegetarian thing for a year as well.
I was 23 and I watched something on Netflix. I can't remember what it was, but it terrified me. I was like, that's it, done. But I had the mindset, if I was like eating, sausage rolls every day, I'd probably be like, it's grand.
Yeah.
But like your mindset's, what impacts you is very different depending on where you're at mentally, what you're allowing to come in.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to bat things out.
Yeah.
And other times let them in. But it's knowing that like the growth mindset, everyone should be fully understanding that as a concept, because a lot of us are operating on fixed mindset.
100%. And what's mad about that is, right, to add to that, is now if I get a smell of bacon and stuff, my stomach gets turned, which is kind of like weird.
But how powerful is the mind?
That's what I'm saying.
The associations. It's like I read this thing the other day and it was like, imagine like eating a lemon, essentially. And like I'm already doing it now, actually. I can taste that in my mouth.
Yeah.
I'm salivating. Yeah. I'm like, oh, there's bitter. That's how powerful the mind is. That I just made a physiological response to a thought.
Yeah.
Like that's so powerful when you fully understand that concept.
And when you start to train that. So I mean, don't get wrong. I mean, if I saw cocktail sausages, I'd have one or whatever, but I don't eat them.
You sell out.
No, I don't. Whatever. But I don't eat them anymore, and I can't read the smell anyway. But there's always an alternative. I'll have one of the flaffles or something, Go back to what I was saying. So I had a client and she loved her chipper, right? She used to eat chipper 3 times a week. 3 times a week, right? It's a lot, isn't it? And she said, how will I ever get up? The smell gets me when I walk past, and I pass it coming home from the bus. How will I ever get up? And I said, what if the smell, and this is going to sound bonkers, right? But this is, anyway. I said, what if when you get that smell and you say no to that smell, you let that smell empower you? And here's the way we reverse dopamine. It's a thing, right? But basically, when she gets the smell, she lost 30 pounds, right? But when she gets the smell of chipper, she goes, that's not in control of me anymore. I feel good. And she literally gets dopamine now from the smell, but in a reverse way.
Exactly.
And I love that. But we can do that with things. And it's not that you have to totally delete something from your life, but be open-minded that your mind is far stronger and neuroplasticity is a thing. You can rewire the brainwaves and the neurons much easier than you think, and you're more capable than you know. And the limiting belief that says you're not enough or you can't or whatever else, we don't know why it's there. Maybe it's past, who knows? But have at least an open mind that you can change it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't make you grow, flow, or glow, say no. Had to get it in there. I love that quote.
It's so good though. Them 3 things: glow, flow, and grow. Because that's it. I've been mad on this bandwagon lately. Like, how can I get into flow state more? And you've really knocked on such an important part of that is actually clearing the mind of all.
Clear the mind, blank the canvas, Now go create.
Because I was like, what should I do? Is it knitting? Is it taking up archery? Like, what could I do to get into this flow state?
I always say a good little help as well, and this is what helped me, like, because I'm working with like high performers all the time and they're very driven. But I tell you what, people think it's getting loads done. They're brilliant at balance. They're great at taking rest, and they're very self-disciplined. Now, I teach it. It's osmosis. I'm going to be like that myself in many ways. Not perfect, but I've come a long way.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm saying it is flow, a way I help people kind of focus and de-stress is I'll say to them, when were you in flow state last? What were you doing? What was lifestyle? What were you reading? What was your routine? Look at that pattern, because there was something working for you in that, and maybe, bring that back. I worked with a girl, real quick story. And she said, the last time I was in flow, she said she had just finished a business degree and she hated business. She said, I don't like business. And my parents have paid for this and I've done this, whatever. She was in UCD. And I've done all this. She said, I hate it. I don't want to go into it. She said, it just bores me. And I said, well, when was the last time you were in that flow creativity? She goes, I was probably about 12 playing with dolls. And I said, well, let's talk about it. She goes, what? And I said, let's talk about it. I said, so what were you doing? She goes, well, I was doing the clothes and I used to love how they looked and whatever else and blah, blah, blah. And I said, is there anything in that maybe that could be a tell for today? This is 25 years later. And she goes, I don't know, but I do love fashion. And I said, what do you do that you lose time on? When you're doing it, you forget how much time you spent on it. She goes, oh, fashion and this, whatever else. She's now a buyer for Primark.
There you go.
Not mad.
There you go.
So that's this. Go back to when you flowed and maybe there's something, a story in there.
Yeah, even when you're colouring when you're young, or you're painting, or it could be something even more simple.
Obviously, you won't be playing with dolls now, but there's something in it.
Yeah, there is.
There is something in it.
I'm trying to think of more of examples to make that tangible. Like, what else have you done in your childhood that like really brought you into that state?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, me personally? Well, I tell you what it was exactly. When I was a youth worker originally, this is a long time ago. There was no internet back then. No, I'm joking. I'm not that old. But it was a long time ago. There was no Instagram anyway. No YouTube either. But I was helping young, when I was working in the inner city, working with kind of teenage young adults and so forth. And I used to get so happy seeing them learn or grow or be better. It used to top me up. Yeah. I didn't make them do anything. I was only young myself. But just being a cog in the wheel that helped them go in a better direction. And that used to top me up. And I learned from that. When I'm doing that, I love it. Yeah. And
well, that's hugely rewarding. Like any kind of, and that's actually something to really focus on. When you help other people or you give, that's like when you feel very fulfilled and your mind kind of slows down.
Gets you out of your head.
It does.
The best way to beat anxiety is help someone else.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Think about it today. Is there any way you can volunteer? I keep saying this lately. I want to volunteer more. My auntie's doing it and she's loving it.
That's why my Instagram came about, because I said I want to help people. There's only so many, like I do a group online or one-to-one. There's only so much I can give. But I said online I could reach many people. Yeah. And I remember when I started Instagram, people going, no one's going to be into that. That kind of this, I suppose, communication skills or people skills or relationship issues. No one's really into, whatever else. I remember starting and I was like, 500 followers. Yeah. But it just topped me up. And I was so enthused. I might as well have had like millions of followers. I was just, because it helped me do what I love to do that makes me fulfilled. And thankfully it's grown. But that's why, find what you do, and maybe how you do it won't be the same way, but the attributes are the same. And that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key. I knew from being a teacher, I did love teaching, but there was elements of it I also didn't like. So now I'm teaching online and I'm reaching a bigger audience that actually wants to listen, and it's the most fulfilling thing.
But this is the thing, like, and that's what Instagram, the algorithm gives you what you want more of. Like, so like when my Instagram really took off, I realized, there are people who are into this. And then you're in the chats and you're in the DMs and then, they come to your courses as well. I'm like, this is kind of, everyone's winning here.
It's community. Yeah, everyone's winning. Exactly. And that, like, you do a lot of work.
Well done on your Instagram, by the way.
Thanks.
My goodness gracious me. So when are you going for president?
Next year. I'm going to wait till the twins are 5. 4 is a little bit busy.
Move over, Michael.
I'd probably double the height of Michael, I said. That'd be different. I'm younger female and 6 foot tall. He's older male and about 5 foot tall.
Yeah, so
that'd be a contrast,
let's
wouldn't
shake it up.
That'd be a bit interesting.
Go for it. Got my vote.
Yeah, hormone balance for the win. What I was actually going to say, you do a lot of really interesting work.
Could we ban ham? I'm only joking.
I'm actually game for that. I don't need any pork myself.
I read this book and it scared the life out of me.
Shamelessly,
it scared the life out of me.
No, I don't eat.
Like all my family eat ham and it. Like I'm not against it at all because I loved it. But when I read the book, I said, "Read this book, you'll never touch it."
Never touch it. Everyone throwing you back the book. Stop.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was a lot of that.
So Mark is actually well equipped to talk about effective relationship advice. I certainly am not. But Mark has actually been married many years now.
Many years.
Tell us the secret sauce.
When you're hitting decades, you know
When you're hitting decades.
Yeah.
Married since he was 21.
Correct. Yeah.
That is the epitome of a cornerstone relationship.
Yeah, you were saying
You've grown together.
Yeah. So there's capstone, which is later in life, and
Yeah.
cornerstone, which is kind of grown in life.
Great one to listen to, actually, if you do want to improve your relationships, is Esther Perel. I'm a huge fan of Esther Perel.
Okay.
Fantastic accent as well. But she did talk about the cornerstone relationship and the capstone. Cornerstone being you grow together.
Very good.
Capstone, you meet maybe your 30s, 40s, beyond, and you know who you are.
Mhm.
You're not growing with them. They're just enhancing your life.
And if you've met someone like, if it's your third time, your second marriage, what are they, a slate? You know, just a slate on the roof. They're not even a capstone.
They're just like the smoke coming out of the chimney.
Yeah, it's just
Irrelevant.
So people ask me what's that, right? So I did relationship mediation many moons ago. And I learned a lot from it. Obviously, you learn a lot, but you see a lot. But there's the Gottman Institute of Relationships, which is kind of the gold standard of relationship counseling and therapy and so on. And they did a study on 8,000 couples.
Mm-hmm.
And the question was, what is the key to a successful relationship, long-term relationship? And a question that was asked commonly was, what was the secret to a great sex life? Was also a question they wanted to find out. They found out the same answer qualified for both. The quality of your friendship within the relationship will lead to a long-term successful relationship and will also lead to a good sex life in a relationship.
It makes total sense though. Like,
because we're kind of geared the other way now. People think, good love life, intimacy, whatever, that leads to, and we kind of cart before the horse is the way things certainly happen now a lot of the time. But it actually goes down to and it sounds old school, but it is, be friends first, ultimately.
Yeah.
And I think, what's a friendship? Shared memories, having the crack, having the laugh, someone who gets you, someone who judges you. You can be vulnerable and they won't come at you. Yeah. All of that is friendship.
Of course, as well, when you're feeling safe and you like the other person and all that, you're going to have better sex with them.
Well, it's
Makes
genuine.
complete sense.
Genuine.
Yeah. And that's why, like, that culture of, one night stands and all that is highly unfulfilling and actually, like, can bring you into really bad mental health because you're with someone that is not filling up your cup at all. Like.
And the self-esteem, because then they don't get back to you and you've been so vulnerable with them. And then it's like, oh my goodness, it must be me.
Yeah.
And then that repeats a few times and then you're feeling like, oh, no one's going to love me. Oh, there's no hope. The loneliness sets in and the depression. So, but with that in mind, I always say that, we were friends first. I was not cool enough. She was no interest in me when I was growing up. My wife, Fiona. Until I shaved my head. Fiona. That changed everything.
Oh, wow.
I went skinhead.
I'm telling you, the power of a male haircut.
I'm telling you.
Huge difference.
She said, I like your haircut. And I was like, I'll never change it again.
Skin fade.
It was like, yeah, it was. So, but here's what I'm going to say. And I remember, because I used to do a show on radio about, what's called sex and relationships, and
you have people. Such a radio voice, it's ridiculous.
People have said that to me.
I felt surreal a few minutes ago. I was like, I'm on the radio. This is weird.
That's mad. Yeah. So I was doing this thing and this show, and people would always ask the same question every week. It was every Thursday. They'd ask the same question. What's the key to meeting someone or whatever else? And I used to say, right, here's the mindset tool. When you're going out to meet a friend, to have the crack.
Yeah.
Anything else after that's a bonus.
Yeah.
So rather than going out to meet that one I'm going to marry and have kids with and settle down with, a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Change the mindset. I'm going to go out and have a crack.
That is the absolute key, right? A friend of mine the other day is dating and she was like, I'm allergic to this. I'm sick of it. Every time I'm just disappointed. And I was like to her, why don't you just go out and say it's to get a good story for the girls or to learn more about yourself?
I love that.
And she
that's
was like,
take the pressure
off.
off.
That's actually grand.
Take
I can
the pressure
deal with that.
off.
Now she's dating and really enjoying it, and it's definitely going to be fruitful because she's going into it in that way. And that's a huge, any encounter you have with a new person is learning for yourself. Even if that person is triggering and annoying and you don't really like them, you still learned about yourself and had to take home. So every interaction, hopefully that most of them are positive, is so good for self-awareness.
Absolutely.
If nothing else.
Look, what's the lesson in it? There's always a lesson in it.
Always.
And it's frustrating, I know. But at the same time, I've worked with so many people that was their biggest kind of thing. I can sort the career, I can sort everything else, financial, blah, 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 blah. But meeting somebody, meeting the one. I said, listen, forgetting about saying the one, that's a whole lot of pressure.
Yeah.
On some poor fella or girl.
And also they have all these mental traps of maybe don't feel lovable personally, or they think, I'm only attracted to a certain type of person that isn't available and this age, so they're all gone. And there's all these mental traps of you're already blocking yourself from meeting someone because every time you meet someone, you say, I'm ruling them out because
You're putting him in a box.
I'm putting him in a box.
Yeah, 100%. And we work from the past again,
Yeah.
only to repeat. But like, I know if Fiona was here, because she's been asked, what's her take on it, and she said, play hard to get. She said that's her thing. She said just play hard to get. She says because if they see you worth it, they'll chase you, and if they don't see you worth it, they won't. And that's just one answer for me.
Again, that's an energy though, because if you go about your life and you're saying, right, well, I still do tennis on a Monday, I have this on a Tuesday, like I'm not rearranging anything. I want you to enhance my life, not disrupt it. And that mindset, I can completely see where she's coming from, because she's maintaining the peace she already has. I think there's a difference.
I'm still chasing her, to be honest with you. But anyway.
There you go. There you go. She's always keeping you guessing.
Don't be impossible.
Yeah, don't be impossible. That's the
thing. But don't be, because I highlight on that if I can, because sometimes the people-pleasing mentality comes into the dating world and you try and please them.
I actually saw this frightening video the other day, and the girl was like, I'm going to keep cooking like sensational Michelin star meals until he proposes to me. And I was like,
well, that's pressure in itself.
Yeah. But also like the mindset of scarcity.
Yeah. They used to call it poverty mentality years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's called scarcity mindset. Same thing. And it's the feel, there's not enough, there's a lack. And if I have something if I have a shiny penny, hold on to it.
Yeah.
There's many other pennies. You know? So I do think the people pleasing thing is an issue when it comes to the relationships. And that's where professionally we want to keep clients happy and so forth. And there's an element of people pleasing, the client's always right. I get that. But that shouldn't cross over into your dating life. And sometimes people have a problem taking off that hat and going, no, just be me. And if they don't like me, good luck. I'll be gone by dessert. We had a nice meal. Yeah.
But that's it. It's like being your authentic self. That's a whole other realm.
It's a whole other day.
A whole other day, because majority of people aren't operating as their authentic self.
Sadly, most aren't. And I get it. Like, I get it. I've been there. When I was going on social media, you saw what everyone else was doing and you feel, oh, you must have to be like that to make it work.
Yeah.
And I got so frustrated because it wasn't me when I first started initially. It was only when I was being myself that it started to work.
Oh, you cannot hide.
And I knew this.
Yeah.
But when I was in it, you the lines blur, so I had to give my own kind of coaching advice and say, Mark, just do yourself. If they like it, they'll follow. If they don't, they won't.
Yeah, because actually social media for me made me be more my authentic self than ever, because it's like I was a horse with blinkers on. I was like, I couldn't care less what anyone thinks of this. Like at the beginning, people I'd say were like, has she lost it? Go back to your teaching job. And I was like, no, this is, I don't care.
Keep her lit.
Keep her lit. You have to look at it like unapologetically.
Yeah.
That's the absolute key, because that's why I suppose a lot of people show up unauthentically.
Yeah.
Because they're nearly saying sorry for being themselves.
Exactly. Oh, sorry. There's a lot of that. No, listen, stop
huge
saying sorry.
Irish female thing to do, I think. Nearly apologize for.
Yeah, I see it in men a lot.
And men too, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like so many men, I don't know if I've no statistics to back this up, but I get this impression that a lot of men, when I do talks and men afterwards to me or whatever else, and I've done teams and I'd be talking to the leadership and, there'd be men within the group but one-to-one they'd tell you, a lot of men seem like they're frustrated a lot or angry over stuff, that just life isn't the way they thought it would be or wanted it to be. Maybe women are vented a different way. But I see this a lot. I'd nearly come to the point and say, a lot of men are not happy, when all is said and done in how things have panned out for them. And is it mismatched expectations? Is it, limiting belief? I don't know, but it's a mixture. But a lot of people seem to be kind of frustrated. And so and the people who are frustrated most are the people who prioritize people pleasing.
Yeah.
Because you're denying yourself. It's soul destroying.
Absolutely.
But I know it's hard to change it.
I heard Rangan Chatterjee on a podcast say when he first started going out with his now wife, he was people pleasing to the extreme where it was irritating for her almost. Because, and I think it's very actually difficult for men now in the last few years. There's a different kind of man that's put on a pedestal. And it's very difficult to, that like 6'4" finance guy, that's what everyone's like think is the status quo now. And it's quite hard then to have self-acceptance and be authentic. Women did that. We did that in the last 50 years. That we've done the comparison thing. People are kind of coming out the other side of it now. I think it's more starting for men now. We were already doing it in the 50s.
Yeah, it's stereotypical text, typecast almost. This is the kind of goal or whatever else. And they say, one of the greatest things in a relationship is laughter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you might not be valuing that. But that's such a strong thing in a relationship, you know.
Also the energy of how you feel and how the other person feels around you. I think people discount that, like just that simple part of it's not what's on the CV, it's what's off the CV.
Yeah, and like
the values.
100%, and your values may not align, you know. So we have to be so careful that our vision board, you know, is relevant to us. There's an old thing in coaching. It's around donkeys. They call it SMART goals. The acronym is around, you know.
Love a SMART goal.
I love a SMART goal. It's got to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. But it's true still though. You might have on your vision board, you know, this house, that job, that guy, that girl, blah, 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 blah. But is it is it actually relevant? Is it realistic to you?
Yeah.
You know, because maybe that kind of person wouldn't suit you. You know what I mean? So there is sometimes, don't make a list of he has to be or she has to be A, B, C, D, you know, a list of 10 traits. I was on a dating app, well, not on a dating app. I was invited on a dating podcast and it was about apps. And they said, we get him in and see what he thinks, you know. And I said, listen, you know, the list you have of the ideals, you know, besides trust and, you know, integrity, which is on everyone's list, because that's a given, burn the list.
Yeah.
You know, the person you meet that makes you feel at your best, just go, but trust your gut.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best way to
There's a lot to be said for just tuning into your gut instinct, because a lot of us are cut off from it.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. Like just learning, how do you develop more of your gut instinct, like listening to it? And I suppose it's like quietening the noise.
It is. Like self-actualization, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and true self and all that. Basically goes back to trusting your gut and living accordingly to it.
Yeah.
And your gut will be wrong too at times, but most of the time it won't be.
Most of the time it won't be. That's the thing. I made a vision board in my mid-20s and everything on it came true.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but I don't want a lot of them things.
See, when you're 20, it's different.
I had to get rid of a lot of them things.
I had no intention of being married in my 20s. Do you know what I mean? Oh no, yeah. I was going to travel and I was going to do all sorts of things and coach in America. I was doing loads of things. But as soon as she showed interest, that was it. Put a ring on that finger. I'm settling down.
I actually would like Fiona to come into the podcast.
That
would be very
She is very
interesting.
straight up. Very straight up.
Yeah. There we go. But I think that's so important, like to circle back.
Should be a good chat though.
It'd be a great chat. The actual, like, being your authentic self and being very mindful of your energy, like what you're allowing in. Because you could be attractive and interesting to someone this week. Next week, your energy has changed. There's no connection.
Yeah. When you're at your, like when some, and people, I've had this on DMs, and I don't do as many relationship videos as I used to. But the DMs would open up. They'd be like, and I would, right? Pandora's box.
For narcissism probably as well. I saw you did.
Oh, I did narcissism, and all I get is do another video on that. Will you do another? Because it's such a, 1 in 5 people are narcissistic, you know, or can be NPD.
1 in 5?
1 in 5. And you know what's mad? The statistic goes up. So in urban areas, it's higher than, in city areas, it's higher than in more community-driven places.
Interesting.
And the simile is that in community-driven places, narcissists are kind of found out. And so they like to go into the city where they can hide. That's what I heard. I'm not saying that don't quote me.
Makes total sense though.
But I heard a girl.
You're going to be sniffed out quicker.
She's a psychologist and narcissism is her specialty, and she diagnosed people with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and that was her take on it. Anyway, going back to I lost my train of thought there now. You'd asked me a question. Lost my train of thought.
I'm gone.
Oh yeah, relationships. They say when you want to meet the one, this is what the DMs comes out.
Yeah.
How do you meet the one? And I say, invest in their one, you.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Invest in you. And because, pursue what you want in life. Be true to you. Don't get too busy where you have no time for people, but pursue. Because when you get around like-minded people, you most likely will meet the person who's like-minded.
Yeah.
And that's the person you'll most likely fall in love with.
Yeah.
So when you invest in you and your personal development as well, your passions, your hobbies, all of those things, when you pursue you, you will probably find someone who's interested in the same.
Yes.
And that's when you least expect it.
And I think when people say that, the person that's very open to communicating with everyone, that person that talks to everyone, your energy is open. I know a woman and she was like, she talked to everyone. Like she was single at the time and she was on a beach, and this woman who was in her 60s was chatting to her, and she's maybe in her 30s at this point. And they chatted for the whole day, and that night they went for dinner and they got on really well. And the woman said, here's a picture of my son, give him a message, she's single, now they're married with kids. But it was just because she was open to other connections.
Yeah.
Obviously, an old lady wasn't her type.
Yeah.
But by opening yourself up to communicating with other people, it opens a realm. So if you're living in a life and you're, going to the gym and work, you don't talk to anyone in either scenario, and you're going out dating, that's very difficult because you're not used to opening up energetically and communicatively.
It's harder, yeah.
Yeah, so I think like that open-mindedness of talking.
See your day as, I'm going to meet people. I might even make a friend, but I'll certainly be approachable.
Yes.
Say hello, a little smile or whatever else. They did a study on faces. And they wanted to find out what was the perfect kind of asymmetry for faces. But what they also discovered in that same research, kind of by fluke, is that people who smile or have a hint of a smile are seen as being more attractive.
Yeah.
So, if you want someone to be attracted to you, well, make yourself, I suppose, naturally approachable.
Yeah.
And because that's the traits we find attractive. If someone's attractive physically, good looking, that's one thing. But if they have a bad personality, the relationship's never going to happen. So what comes from the real you? The smile, the hello, the friendliness. I know that's basic stuff, but it's true because you have people who aren't like that.
Yeah.
Go around like, what do they
RBF.
RBF. I have one of them that when I'm not smiling, people go, "What's wrong with you?" I'm just not smiling. Resting bitch face. So look at that,
Yeah.
And how it was because I was talking away and my wife took a photo. I was doing an interview with, it was the Irish Times at the time. So it was an interview. It was kind of serious. Yeah. And when they were asking me questions, I was just thinking. So I was like this. And my wife was sitting across, it was in like a bar area, a lounge. And she took a photo because she said, "I'm looking at your face the whole time. You look like misery warmed up." I said, "That's me concentrating." She goes, "You've such a resting bitch face."
Yeah.
And I realized I need to be aware of my...
That's so funny. When you did that face, you've been smiling most of the podcast. When you did that face, you had a completely different demeanor.
I know.
Mad.
So I'm like, because I smile a lot as well. That's
yeah.
Thankfully. Or if I'm not smiling, I'm crying. But other than I'm joking.
I have about 12 to 15 other questions for you, and we're pretty long into this, which I can't believe.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that
okay.
mental?
Wow. Okay. So that was good chats.
Great chats. Of a lot of other questions.
Part 2.
Maybe
then.
Part 2 for sure. But tell us where we can find you.
Yes. You laughing at?
Go on.
Tell us where we can find you. What does that mean?
No, because poor Dan's going to have to edit all this laughing out.
No. I'm not giving you my address.
Please tell us where you find you. Yeah, the address,
air code.
everything, your air code. Give it all.
Account number.
Yeah.
So markfennell.ie on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah.
And then the weight loss program is weightwellness.ie.
Nice.
And then the website is markfennell.ie. So
and the book.
Breakthrough. Yes, the
Lovely.
book.
I'm really looking forward to reading this.
Bookstores. It's practical.
Yes.
You keep it real. You know yourself.
Yeah,
and,
I'm so looking forward to reading this.
So there you go.
Fab.
But yeah, listen, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Mark, for laughs and a lot of actually very interesting concepts to mull over and put in practice. So thank you.
That's it. Keeping it real.
Keep her lit.
Keep her lit.